of painting and sculpture at the Modern, who's an extraordinary speaker and really knowledgeable about a lot of things, and also Joseph Mashek, who had been the editor of Art Forum for a long time. And because of Joseph Mashek, I was able to do my thesis in contemporary art, which ordinarily I would not have had the option to do in that context. So then I went on to do, writing and be involved with a magazine called Splash Magazine, which is an art and fashion publication. And one thing and another, I ended up doing some lecturing in Austria, actually partially on behalf of our friend Johann Traar over there, and a number of other places, and moved to California about 8 years ago and spent a lot of time during that time in Europe, a lot of it in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And essentially the focus of my work during sort of recent times has been to bridge both science and the arts. I'm sure we'll get into more of those points, but I think we're at a really potent moment, and there's a lot of opportunity to clarify some very interesting and long-standing ideas, and I've really tried to address those issues, but in a way that is maybe more accessible. I think that the rarefied atmosphere that tends to grow up around the arts can be overwhelmingly precious and really not informative, and I'm very opposed to that kind of heavy-handed, self-congratulatory approach to art theory, and I've tried very hard to orient my work in a way that is sophisticated yet understandable. I think that people are a lot more sophisticated than they're generally given credit for, and I try to aid that process in terms of communicating about the arts.
Okay, that gives us a little bit of a sketch. If anybody can't hear, let us know, because we don't mic this so that it has more of an intimate character, a communal character, so please let us know if you can't hear us. So why don't we start? And we talked the other day about starting, I think we started talking about maybe about the four forces, laying out just a little real brief. Isn't that how we were going to start? Is that right? Yes. Okay. Do you want to start by just, I thought what we would do is Dr. She would just lay out some of the fundamental information in a very simple way of the four forces and then quantum, and then we would go from there. So it may be repeating knowledge for some of you, but I figure it'll start us off all on the same page to some extent. So do you want to start?
Yeah, the topic we would like to discuss is that what is the universal interaction among things? Now, what do we know really from a physics point of view? That there are fundamental interactions among the objects. There are gravitational interactions, there are electromagnetic interactions, and there are those forces which are the basic mechanism to maintain the very small constituents of the universe, that's the particles. And those are called strong and weak interactions. Now these are the four we call fundamental interactions among the things. Now, the question we usually raise is that what are other forms of interactions when we gradually move to a more complex system, not the basic, very elementary constituents of the universe. Between particles, either is weak or strong or electromagnetic or gravitational. Now gravitational is very, very weak compared to the others. But however, if you have a group of particles, now we talk about a different, more complex interactions. Give an example. If we talk to molecules, what is molecules interact with molecules? And that we call the chemical interactions. But what is the chemistry really about? The chemistry is about what we can call a composite interaction. There is a group of particles interacting with another group of particles. They are not exactly electromagnetic because there are certain positive charges and negative charge. There are also the other positive charge and negative charge. They interact. The standard electromagnetic interaction cancels each other because of positive and negative charges. But there is some reminiscence of this interaction strong enough to bond this two groups of molecules together. to form a big, more giant molecules. And there we get into the inorganic or organic or biochemistry. Now, when a system becomes larger and larger and more complex, we can imagine that the system has a degree of functionality at level higher and higher. Now, what is this composite interaction then? For example, what is the interaction between me and you? Is this electromagnetic? Maybe, yes. However, we have a group of structures so complex that any law we learn from the physics, from the electromagnetism, does not give us any hint to describe the interaction between you and me. Such a composite, hierarchical structure. Here we are. Here we are get to the very old time. Our ancestors in the East. Now here I'm talking about the things I know of China. That they don't have the instrument. They don't have the microscope. They don't have this Wilson chamber to study.
I didn't know what the word was. What?
Okay. The Wilson chamber is an instrument, is a room to detect the elementary particles.
Right.
Very small particle, tiny bit, but when it goes through the so-called Wilson chamber, they leave a trace.
What?
Okay.
A kind of a chamber.
Some sort
A
of
chamber. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have plenty of translators here today.
Thank you. And therefore, at that time, what they can study, the only thing they use to study the environment, the interaction among beings, is their brain. And what stage of the brain? And they were at the very so-called quiescent stage of the brain, when they meditate, when they relax, and they get a clear mind, and they sense the interaction with the environment, and they sense that's what all things has been written in even Buddha's script and other documents. In China, you know that there are Tao Te Ching, describe some of the interaction laws. There are
I didn't know that.
I Ching is changing. These are the two big Bibles in China.
But are they Bibles of physical interaction as well? I mean, are they Bibles of physics in a certain way?
What if you look at that, what they really describe, they are not really describe what we now call the fundamental interaction between these very simple particles. They will always talk about how the human beings interact with outside. Okay, such a complex system and what is the law which governs the interaction, and they give a lot of rules that you should do this. If you don't do that, your fate will be terrible, such and such. So people took this script as somehow has the predictive power, or you can read it in many different ways, has the philosophical contents. But if you look at more from my perspective, from my scientific perspective, I think what they really describe is a certain rule which governs the interaction among more complex systems, especially the system associated with human societies.
Do you think those are based in some way on a deep understanding of the interaction of particle interaction of an understanding? I mean, I don't know exactly how to frame the question, but you talk about Chinese scientists for 3,000 years, in a sense, using their brain to study the environment, which is what science is.
Yeah. What this science is that people will put themselves in a quiescent state and try to feel what is going on there, and they go and experience it. Experiment and set up the condition and look at what the result final is, and so on and so forth. That's to me that's very much similar to the kind of experiments we do in our laboratory, except that we are trying to create a sample which is rather simple, that you can follow the law more accurately, more quantitatively. But back 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago, the people was unable to do that. But they take a big laboratory around them to try to experience with their behavior. And that's why there are so many traditional layers created and the culture created And that's what I feel the energy. Earlier I speak about this cultural energy. And that is the energy. What energy for me is if you do something according to the law, you're going to survive. Otherwise, you're going to destroy. And therefore, if you do things according to the law, your society sooner or later have a strong force, have this bonded force to maintain.
It's a little like I think of an artist friend of mine, Matthew Thomas, who says, as you remember the truth inside yourself, you understand who you are. In a sense that the truth is another way of perhaps saying the laws, I mean, within the human being.
That to some extent is similar.
Okay.
But so keep it short that what I now with my new physics reading, back to read the old one, especially as you told already the audience that I'm a Qigong student, and I experience myself. I repeat some of the meditation and things. I repeat some of things what people will say our ancestor is doing. And I try to feel what is the interaction. For example, I can start with a laboratory right in my family, with interaction between me and my family members. How can I discover the real law between my interaction with others? And how would I can change my behavior in order to set up a more harmonious environment in the family? This is what I'm trying to do according to the Qigong, which is one of the things we're going to talk about more detail later.
But I can't help it. But I'm very curious. I mean, it's a very beautiful picture that you set up. I mean, it's almost as if there's the picture of the Chinese scientist who uses his own peace, his or her own peace and meditative state of being at rest and being in power, in a sense, to observe, and that in a sense is balanced or contrasted with a Western scientist who in a sense tries to take him or herself out of the interaction, in a sense. Is that?
Yeah, let me just clarify a little bit. The point I try to make is that a couple thousand years ago, people there are experienced, the changing environment, and I think what they do is using their brain, using their body as a laboratory to study the interaction among the things. And that's the concept Qi we're going to discuss later in more detail. Now, a couple of thousand years later, that the science is going in a different direction, come to study what is the fundamental interaction among the simple constituents. And we made a tremendous progress in that. And the result of this is being such a big step in our description of the universe, and also all the technology around us, all this, all the fabrication here around us is the product of such a progress. However, as far as the law of interaction among complex beings, especially the living beings, there, I think we haven't made fundamental breakthrough yet. And that's the place where the Eastern, Asian science and modern, Western science, and this is what the bridge we have to make. And there is when we create a new metaphor with quantum information. Is the two modern words also has the Qi as the first letter acronym. So we try to see that Qi belongs to the Eastern Asian culture. Qi also belongs to the Western New Science culture, and this is subject we would like to discuss today.
Okay, so why don't we, so now laying out those four forces, then do you want to now talk about the whole idea of quantum? Would that be a good next place to go? Is that?
I think before we do that, I'd probably give my version of what you just
please
said,
do
which
that.
might be somewhat similar yet different. I think that, a lot of people here are probably familiar with the book The Tao of Physics, for instance, by Fritjof Capra, or this notion that there are plenty of comparisons that can be made between terms of physics evolved for quantum mechanics and other kinds of, fields within physics, and Eastern philosophical terms. For instance, there's any number of books like The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, in which he also makes some of those kinds of comparisons. An example would be that David Bohm, who's a very, well-known physicist whose work interests all three of us a great deal, talks about a kind of order in the universe that is implicate or an enfolded order that's there. And we might later spend a little time talking more precisely about what that means. But let's say, in essence, that the information that constructs the universe and makes the reactions occur, which occur, are somehow packed into the material that makes up the universe in such a way that it has its own sort of enfolded instructions, kind of like DNA in some sense. Our DNA is enfolded information for us that makes us, what we are, and that's that manifestation. So he talks about order in the universe that's either enfolded or is implicate, that is, that it's actually manifested into something and is, concrete and available and real, so either potential or already existing. Well, this same set of, and he divides everything in the universe as being one or the other. It's either one or the other. This same kind of binary division occurs in Tibetan Buddhism. For instance, they talk about, the void or the non-void. Or the Apaches talk about the manifested, already occurring, and the manifesting, something that has a future potential. There's lots of Western scientific terms and indigenous culture terms or Eastern religion terms or shamanistic terms where many, many peoples around the world have divided the universal order of things into things that either are or could be, and that language can be, very rigorously Western, like what David Bohm says, or it can be very broad-based, something that you can intuit, the void and the non-void, being and non-being. This is all it sounds a lot like Hindu language, actually. And what has struck many physicists is that in an attempt to talk about new understandings brought about by, say, the implications of quantum physics, you end up with language that sounds an awful lot like some of the great traditional mystic texts of the East, whether that's Vedic or Chinese or other possible traditions, like the Aborigines in Australia also have a lot of things that are quite relevant to that discussion. So I think that there's a couple of traditions that are there that are often kind of pitted against one another, but in fact are probably the same thing, or opposite sides of the same coin. And that's an idea that is a powerful and useful one for us at this particular time, where we're looking at a paradigm shift. We're seeing that things are, somehow things are very new, and yet somehow there's something quite familiar about what that is, and people in all different kinds of fields are reaching towards some kind of understanding of what they sense to be something that they know. It's available to them. They can feel that truth, the kinds of truths that we were talking about are there, but they're looking for language in which to express that, and you have two sets of language available. Go ahead.
Is a lot of this like with Western science or just with science in general, like kind of like catching up late in the game, you know what I mean? Where a lot of the information that they think that they're discovering, they're actually rediscovering. When he talk about a lot of the rules that were talked about in the two Bibles that you mentioned in China, and how you came back to that point again through Western science or through more contemporary type science. You know what I mean? Well, a lot of stuff that we know now, people already knew like 1,000 years ago. Do you think it's like a rediscovery now?
What do you
think it's like?
Yeah, I just want to take a few steps back to see what we really have achieved with our physics understanding of the world. Are we rediscovering, to your question, or we just rediscovering under slightly different condition and at different level? Now, the traditional physics was discussed discuss the interaction among very simple things. Start with Newton, with rocks and planets and all this simple object, gravitational force and rotating around each other. Now, in 19th century, that our tremendous progress to move on to the description of the lights, electromagnetism. And here we are entering into a very new world, that not every interaction is so clearly well defined as in our original mechanical sense. Things are get out of the mechanics already. And there, you probably all know that we have the wonderful world of relativity, because the light is so fast, and things are getting much more paradoxical as what we know usually as our intuitive world. Until the 20th century, until we penetrate into the very small microscopic world, that world we consider how the atom is made up, there people suddenly discover that the things are not at all what we know, either from the mechanical point of view or from the electromagnetic point of view, which is the light wave point of view.
I'm going to stop you just for a minute because I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
We I don't know if anybody else is or not, but we are when you talk about the electromagnetic energy and the
Mechanical.
and the mechanical.
Okay, basically the mechanical is look at everything as a particle. Okay, but electromagnetic ones look at everything as a wave.
Okay.
They propagate the interference and
Einstein united those.
yeah. No, not Einstein united those. It's quantum mechanics united those too. Is that if you go to the very small world, you find the world is neither wave nor particle. Now, what is particle is about? Particle has energy. Particle either there or not there. Definitely there's mass over here. What is wave? Wave is very non-localized. Wave, if I talk about the wave can be either here or there. There's
Wave
a
is
wave.
movement,
There's
huh?
movement. There's everywhere. Especially when you talk about what we call the monochromatic wave. Some wave has one frequency. A laser, for example, is close to that. This is a wave. Usually, if you don't talk about it, if you talk about it, this wave is instantaneous everywhere in the whole universe. That's something. Not
If we talk about it.
if you say there is a wave of such frequency, such frequency, only one frequency, then this wave will have its excitation. The wave is always an excitation everywhere in the universe. It's not localized. If you talk about localized wave, then you have to have a broad band of frequency. It cannot be has one frequency. One sine wave is everywhere. Okay. Now, there's a picture people try to construct at early time of quantum mechanics to say microscopically that we are maybe a wave package. But then it is discovered things doesn't work out. In other words, that at the very small scales, at the very small what constitutes our understanding of the universe, it's not like light is not like a particle, some light photon come to my eyes, nor there is some propagation thing going on. Actually, it can be in between both. Now, for those of you who have learned something about quantum mechanics, there's so many paradoxical facts that people try to understand but couldn't quite. Unless you admit that the thing you are looking at either sometimes look like a particle, sometimes look like a wave. One look like a particle or one look like a wave, that's at your wish. So something is of this sort come up.
But we know that in terms of perception. I mean, we know that in terms of our lives. If you look at something with a certain kind of attention or intention, that it can be one thing, or you can pay attention to a person or an event with another way, and it can be something else. I mean, I don't know if that's a fair jump to make, but I'm trying to make.
You mean
sense.
like the subjective interpretation?
Well, not only interpretation, but I mean, there's an active. I mean, when you talk about you're looking at something.
But scientists does not like that.
Well, good.
They want either, you give a clear description, you clarify what exactly you're talking about, and or you shut up.
But
they want my like this kind of course, this is in the earlier 19th century's, the philosophy. But in 20th century, they tried hard to change, but they couldn't quite change.
It's very difficult.
Now it's still quite change. That's the physicist what Ms. Crockett has mentioned earlier, David Bohm. David Bohm is a physicist who studied quantum mechanics for 40 years or 50 years for all his life. And his interpretation of quantum mechanics is radically different from the rest of the physicists. He adopted perception. And if I create my own version of his theory, I would say that the quantum mechanics, just like it describes the underlying current. What is underlying current means that everything everywhere in the universe are connected with everything else. That's what quantum mechanics is talking about. It's one which they call the wave function. There's a wave function describes the state of the universe. Any other interaction are kind of approximately that this object can be isolated from the others, but approximately. Completely they have to be interact. But what you see, either particle or wave, is what you see above the surface of the sea. Suppose there are some underlying currents going on. Give an example as El Nino, for example. El Nino is a phenomenon we see here, above the ocean. But what is really created on El Nino is the undercurrent in the ocean. Because the ocean has a current that the hot stream goes up from one side and come down from the other side. And this circle sometimes is not regular. That's one of the things I study in chaos theory, how this stream actually have a very chaotic dynamics. And this is what the quantum mechanics talk about. They talk about undercurrent, but what you see, you can only see some things under the surface. And sometimes,
what you see, you can only
when the physicists study it, we're using the instrument to detect it. What they can only detect things above the surface, and sometimes, depending on what instrument they use, they detect a particle. Sometimes they detect a wave. But the underlying one, which is everything is connected to everything else, and this is the principle of quantum mechanics. Does not itself distinguish the particle or wave. Does not sometimes give particle, sometimes give wave. So if you admit that, there's no contradiction whatsoever. The universe we see, this duality, wave-particle duality, is what the duality we see above the surface. Under the surface is unified very well, and that's why quantum mechanics have this very beautiful formalism, which is the Schrödinger equation or the Heisenberg equation, any one of the big physicists, they have worked out this. For that, there's no contradiction whatsoever. But you have to admit, if you follow their description, that everything is connected to everything else.
And does that description square up with what you believe? Is that
And that is the metaphor that everyone else is using. Either is in the Tao of physics, in other more contemporary, deeper chapter, and everyone used the word quantum mechanics. They are not really using it in a strict scientific sense. They use it as a metaphor in saying that everything is connected to everything else. That's the basic truth what the quantum mechanics is revealing to the world. But this sentence is not particularly satisfactory for me. What I like to see as a physicist is I want to understand how the underlying current is driving the El Nino. I want to know exactly what this relation, so that you use the underlying current not as a convenient metaphor to explain things, which later you find that when I want to know exactly what the rule of interaction, you still don't know anything.
because you don't know about what is underlying.
Exactly. So my goal as a physicist, also as a Qigong practitioner now, I'm being able to sense of this interaction. I like to study more this mechanism. And there, I think our ancestors already told us a lot. Now come back to your point that, do we rediscover things? I think we never rediscover anything, but we always keep deepening our understanding. We re-express it in a different form with a new experience added in. Now if I look back to the expressions written 2,000 years ago, with my new background in quantum mechanics, my understanding will be, I think, already a step forward. And therefore, I think the current situation, to my perspective, keep it short, is that people try to use different metaphor to describe the same thing, which is the nature. Nature is the human being interaction with the environment, and also the interaction among the simple things and among the complex things. Different people use different words to describe that. And there are similarities among the words they are saying, but the contents are different depending on their own experience. What I like to unify is to take all their experience, their unique experience, and put them together and to go further. For example, for answering more practical questions, what's the tomorrow of our health science? What is tomorrow of our bioengineering science? These questions are very practical, and these are a test of whether you have a real knowledge or you just have a metaphor.
But how does that the test if you are asking about tomorrow today?
Tomorrow is, for me, that is convenient word to say. Is that today we still don't have a good, I believe, good science of health. The notion, even the notion of the health, is not properly defined. And so, if we have a better understanding, for example, now, just give an example. Now, if my temperature, body temperature, is raised above 37 calcium, I will not consider myself sick. And in fact, I was not sick because after a couple of hours of such raise of temperature, I find myself more energetic than before. Now, this is a practitioner, of course, not everyone have my experience. So the notion of the health is not just I have a fever, means I'm sick. You know, this notion does not work for me anymore. So the notion of the health also get to be reconsidered depending what situation we are, and so on and so forth. And so there.
So are you just saying about that, about health, or you used another field as well, health science or bioengineering, I think you said.
Yeah.
So basically you're saying that we need more powerful theories in order to be able to predict. We don't have predictive power in these fields because we don't have adequate theories.
No, actually, we are still very, very far. Even we still don't have a good descriptive theory, even before that predictive theory.
Right.
So just let's step by step. What I want is that first of all, the first step for the theory is to be descriptive.
Yes.
But descriptive is to assemble a variety of facts to put them in one basket. First of all, that should be achieved.
Yes.
And then you should try to reach out to predict new things we don't know about. And the health science, I'm sorry, it's even not to put all things together. Psychology and physiology are still separate two pieces. Mind and bodies, people all think that they should be united, but what is the theory to unite them?
Not yet.
Not yet. That's why I talk about tomorrow.
And so maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'm curious, the picture that keeps recurring when you're talking now is for me, is of the 3,000 or 5,000 year ago Chinese scientist who is using his or her meditative quiet center in order to make these descriptions. Now, how does that fit into what you're talking about now?
It's very simple. The body itself is a tremendously sophisticated, sensitive element, instruments. The brain is the most sensitive instrument in the universe to detect any signals. Now, through what? Through our nerve system, the feelings we have. When this incoming either energy or information trickled your nerve system, you will have a feeling. Happy, you're sad, or you have a little cold, feel hot, and so on and so forth. All this are the sensitive instrument. Now, why? Because this instrument is made itself a very gigantic, sophisticated structure. The functionality is tremendous. Tremendously complex. Now, if you start to use that system, and to experience. That's what part, for example, meditation is essentially a way to experience that. I use the word scientist in that particular sense, that they use this sensing system. There are lots of latent potentials which are already recorded in old stories, legend, all that different literatures in China, which now people do not particularly feel. There's a whole big world of psychic here in the West, and people have a very strong skepticism towards it. But a lot of people also believe it. Why? Because they have their own experience, just like the psychic. So whether it's a fact or not, I don't want to judge, because I'm a scientist. I want to study it. If people report this, I want to study it. But I would like to point out that the similar things happen in ancient time, in now, in West, in East, everywhere. What is all that about? Is about the feeling that we have, and use that feeling to consciously. That's what difference. To consciously set up the experiments, to look at the evolution, to look at the input and output, and so on and so forth. And that system, back to the point, is that what they have concluded is a set of recipe, for example, and how to make that system to be effective. And this is the one I'm learning. I'm learning for another 4 or 5 years, and I have a lot of things to tell on that. But I feel that it's possible to use the body this way, and you learn things this way too.
A couple of times you've hinted at something, and you too hinted at something when you mentioned the Tao of physics. Capra doesn't use Buddhist thought as much as he does Hindu, I believe, as he makes the comparison between Hindu thought as opposed to Pareto, who uses Buddhist thought. So he talks about physics and Buddhism, and Fritjof Capra talks about physics and Hindu, specifically in terms of particles, in terms of everything being in motion. For example, it's one of the most astounding things to me is how 3,000 years ago, or at any time before knowing about the fundamental interaction between things, that Hindu thinkers could have known that everything is in motion and that everything is essentially dancing particles. Now, they knew this absolutely. I mean, this is a big part of Hindu thought. Now, and you're talking about using the body as an instrument to detect and determine the fundamental interaction between large-scale systems, complex adaptive systems such as ourselves. I just wanted to ask you, someone who thinks about this a lot, as opposed to anybody else I know, to talk about this. It occurred to me some time ago that the way people do know this is because they are it and it is them. I am the universe. It is me. It created me. I am it. There is no universe separate from me. I am the universe. I am the product of the universe, and as we all are, as the chairs, everything. If one assumes that in fact everything is one thing, and I think that transcendent experience tells us that everything is one thing. When we sense the unity of all that is, that's when we are the most joyful and we have a sense of that which really is. Well, every system of thought has attempted to make a recipe for how to achieve this knowledge of the oneness. And yet we can and we do simply because we are that. Okay. Well, I guess what I'm asking you is, as a physicist and a practitioner, a learning person, and I don't really quite know what this word is, Qigong, that you're using, I don't know what that means. A student of Qi? Is that what that means?
The Qigong is, Qi is the universal interaction and energy
yes,
field.
The universal.
And Gong is the work, using the Qi to do the work.
Using Qi to do the work.
Yeah, that Qigong is the...
Well, I wanted to ask you what you thought about that, essentially using oneself as representative of the universe and that which is, and the various ways, and then, because to me that's the only way they could have known that.
It's a very natural question, and I have thought a lot about it, and this is one of the first things to, when you hear all these different schools thought, and that's what Qigong actually, the things I'm learning now give me a more confidence is that the previous schools seem to try to say, everybody try to say that I'm telling the truth. Now, this is not the science. Now, science is looking for the ultimate truth, and everyone is catch a piece of it. Now, I personally consider that telling I am the universe, the oneness, the so-called oneness, is just a convenient story. The way that you put yourself in interact with others is a technique to forget the self, to try to unify with the surrounding. And that's a very good technique. However, technique is technique. Just like in science, there's all different kind of convenient models to think about it, to guide our practice, to guide our technology, and so on and so forth. But we can confidently say that none of the model is the ultimate model. Now, just here is the same thing. Just give an example why we don't need the oneness to really talk about that. What if I think that myself, I have my body here, as everyone sees that this is the existence, but what if I also have a surrounding field around me, which is also part of me, which can reach as far as I want, just guided by imagination, by my thought. In that case, both is true. Particle and wave, both are true. Particle, you see my picture here, I cannot myself not replace the rest of the universe. Just I can. However, I can unify as close as I can with my field, other field, with my wave, as close as possible to the rest of the universe. There's two states. You can either go either way.
Can you be both?
And you can be both. And in fact, for me, that the real essence of the human being, that actually you can freely be both. You can be in the particle, picture of particle. You can also be the picture of the wave. So you don't have to emphasize that, well, the truth is I am the universe. I am the universe. You are not the universe. I'm not the universe because it's still there are you here, and there are you here. Everyone is here, and there's everyone here. No. However, if you get into some of the reason I'm saying this is that there are schools telling that the ultimate you is the whole universe.
That's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you turn your back, then the universe stops to exist. You only create it while you're watching it, and that only I exist, and that no one else exists. That one only knows that one exists, and that everyone else is just a collection of data that you suppose is there because it's repeatable over time. I didn't mean that. No, that's an interesting theory, which is, I think, related to Maya a little bit, that everything's an illusion, and that's a little complicated subject. What I meant was, I didn't mean that I am the universe, but I meant being a product of the universe. I know it from inside, because whatever interactions are going on in the universe are going on in me. I meant fundamental stuff of the universe.
This here is what is what is needed to be a little bit considered carefully is the word inside and outside. And here we use our traditional notion of space and time in a very classical sense, like there is something inside and there is something outside. And the paradox will come in that if I want to study something outside, I just need to study my thing inside, because inside carries something outside. Now, something does not work out this way, very intuitive. And unless that we say that if you are getting into a complex system like this, the human being, and this is there's proteins, and there's the immune system, there's gene transcription, there's all this complexity. If you describe the functionality of that system, the convenient coordinate you use is no longer the space and time. The inside and outside self lose the meaning. And that's what the way actually quantum mechanics itself can come to help, that you can say that, well, piece of here, conveniently, that piece of here carries information on piece of there, but I don't really mean so because there isn't such overlap, unless that we are connected through another space,
or
through the another dimension.
Or through relationship,
So
no?
through relationship, you can say that through another, maybe convenient story. All these are convenient stories to see which one tells better predictive power or better descriptive power. You can say that, well, just like we all live on the surface of the sphere, but we have connections through the sphere, many connections inside. So two different points.
What are the connections inside? Inside the sphere, you mean inside the planet we have connections?
Yeah, the real space is three-dimensional, but we are only see the space through the surface, two-dimensional. There's one more dimension here, which also can transfer information, energy, and so on and so forth. If that's the case, I'm just taking this as a model, then we don't have to restrict our vision into the interaction on the surface, which is the interaction in our three-dimensional space. Sometimes you can channel inside.
But so if we have an interaction which is on the surface, how is that different than an interaction which is inside?
Well, that's what the physics has to study, and then we have to set up a special experiment.
But can we talk about it in gross terms? Can we talk about it in
I have a lot of story to tell on that aspect, but I'm afraid of telling this because this is a bit too premature.
You want to talk about the Qi first? You want to talk about Qigong first?
All this most of that are speculations, but they have some good metaphor.
Premature in terms of we're going to get it later on in the evening, or?
Later on in his life.
3 years when you published it.
Maybe we have to have another lecture.
No, we get some of it tonight, please.
We
have a question
I
here.
had a question regarding the physics that we're discussing. Quantum mechanics talks about intention. Could you address that problem, that in observing particle physics, that oftentimes the physicists will notice that the particles will react the way they expect them to react and not the way they're supposed to, or that the way they are thinking, the particles will all of a sudden appear in that manner, and rather than the way that the hypothesis of the experiment was set up?
Well, here I hear the flavor of those popular quantum mechanics and real quantum mechanics. Now, people talk about intention and the quantum mechanics as intention or something. This sounds like popular quantum mechanics. Now, the real story in quantum mechanics is this: that there is experiments. You can set up the experiments. You set up the experiments with certain environment. It's going to determine the results of some output. Whether actually you do it or not is not important. So this is the now even I say this is not so accurate. So that's why it's already a bridge between what the so-called intentional quantum mechanics and the non-intentional classical physics. Even that is not so accurate. So quantum mechanics will not tell this. It's a different way to interpret the quantum mechanics, to insert the word intention in it. But still, there are some truth. Again, there's some truth. If we believe logically that everything is connected to everything else in space, then why should we say that everything is connected to everything else, every event is connected to every event else in time? Because after all, space and time are unified. There's no distinction between space and time. Now, the future and the past are also connected. And there, actually, the word intention will come in. But so far, it's not come in, it's merely a metaphor. And therefore, there I want to caution here about is that there are a wide speculations about what physics is. And there are big difference between the speculation and the really accurate physical theory.
Sure, and is it possible that I was reading this afternoon about a physicist by the name of Lee Smolin, who talks about how he says that there is no, he talks about the laws of physics as an endless negotiation. He uses the metaphor that there's that as we don't make a city, we don't make the universe, but that there's this endless negotiation and renegotiation within the universe, which is the laws the way I understand him in a very kind of probably very gross way is that there's a sense of movement, that just as there's a sense of dynamism in who we are and how we understand or move through the universe, that the universe also has that sense of dynamism. Is that I mean, how uncomfortable is that for you as a way of looking at things?
If I do not have the rigid framework of classical physics, if I have all the implications of the quantum mechanics in mind, and then if I look at all the different metaphors, different theories, and different ancient or the modern, Asian, I mean that maybe the Chinese, Asian and Indian, Asian theory, modern maybe deep chakra and others theory, and Western, Eastern, Western. I myself, I do not feel uncomfortable. I think there's a great deal of integration going on there, try to unify all the pieces together. The problem I have is that people seem to take too seriously what they are talking about. Without understanding that every word we say have to have experimental support. In other words, that the people talk about quantum mechanics in the deep chakra way. I feel it's not scientific. But people talk about the physics, even the modern physics, in relation to the biochemistry or something. They are a little bit too sure about what they are saying either. They try to say that the molecular genetics of molecular is the future of the. There are this kind of spirit.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'd like to do here a little bit is maybe go to. I sort of want to go to some curiosity about Qigong. I feel like we've sort of established a little bit of a common language about what we're talking about in terms of physics. I don't know if does that seem pretty comfortable? And maybe to at this point to talk about the other part of the.
Before we talk about Qigong, maybe we can talk about a little bit how the reason I'm getting involved in also people in art, like Miss Crockett and others. They are in the is I think there is the physics law seem to, if we look at it correctly, seem to be also applicable not only for the physics system, non-living system, also is good for the living system, even it's good for the social organizations such like big living system, and that's where the culture, the art is about. Maybe invite Ms. Crockett talk about a little bit how she is interested in Qigong and how that is this vision.
But I think we need to define it first. I think we need to define what Qigong is, because I think a lot of us don't know really what it is.
Right, okay.
Maybe you do it together, and you're being very quiet over here.
The metaphor Qi is back very early in the 3,000, 7,000 years ago that our ancestors in China, when they first feel that there is certain interaction between everything and everything else. And that interaction seemed to go like a fluids. So the word qi in Chinese is the air, the fluids. Something is very soft. Something, however, is constantly there. You never miss it. Something also has a long interaction, has a long duration of the effects. And something is very persistent. Okay, and that seemed to better to characterize the interaction among the beings. So what they say is that everything possesses a qi, possesses an air. What air at that time, you know that air is something invisible, right? We only know the air in the last couple hundred years. We know the air exists, but before We don't know this. So, and very ancient time, the air is something invisible to us, but we all feel its existence. That's what the metaphor air, Qi, is created.
I think in this case, that's kind of a translation like from the ether. You know, I mean, even the ancient Greeks discussed this, you know, ambient field or available place that we're walking through as kind of like the ether. Qi is, I mean, to kind of offer some more different kinds of definitions also. I think Qigong, and like the Gong is the same as like Kung Fu is hard work. It's that Gong is the same, it's just it's different dialectical pronunciation. So Qigong could also be translated as like energy work. Also, we've talked about in the past that Qi is a little bit like the Force in Star Wars, to make it, you know, really simple and directly, you know, available in a certain way. And there is certainly a kind of fluidity to it. You know, I practice Tai Chi, for instance, Tai Chi Chuan, and in working with that, I certainly feel there's a certain almost like gooiness to the energy that you move around in working with that. I'm sure people who do dance or other kinds of things like that know that feeling of energy that they can work with. That's also Qi. And Qi is also like the prana, like in people who might study yoga or, you know, other yogic systems, that also is the same kind of thing as prana, in which case that would be a bit like breath. So to say that it's air, you know, there's air in a lot of different kinds of ways, and how that can be moved around. And Qigong is the large category term for those kinds of meditational and moving, you know, both seated, moving, and scientific arts that we think of as being traditionally drawn from ancient China. So that medical systems involving acupuncture or acupressure, or the entire traditional Chinese medical understanding of the body as having meridians that move, meridian channels that energy moves through, is also, you know, essential. I mean, the notion of Qi is a fundamental notion to that entire view of the body, and also provides a wonderful avenue for the mind-body connection that we discussed, or that you alluded to earlier. Qi is certainly something that can be cultivated, it can be increased, it can be moved through the body, that can have tremendous impacts in the body. That is, for instance, one wonderful avenue for providing the West with a mind-body connection system that would be efficacious and utilizable in a broader sense. And of course, we do see that there's a tremendous interest in this country, you know, just to broadly use that dreadful word, New Age, people are clearly very interested in unifying Eastern, Western ideas, modern and ancient ideas, and this is a place where there's a lot of dialoguing going on, a lot of different levels. But the medical system in particular, like the National Institute of Health just recently appointed someone to study alternative medicine in a serious and significant manner. And a lot of what they're focusing on are the medical systems of the East, you know, as a certain great beginning place. You remember when Richard Nixon went to China and people in this country first learned about acupuncture, for instance, there were very dramatic documentaries about, I remember a woman who had had open heart surgery just using acupuncture as her anesthetic, and her recovery rate is so much faster. She can move herself off of the table after the operation. You know, unthinkable things in the United States, and that was already in the 70s when we first had exposure to those systems. So there are certainly some, you know, radically powerful things available in the traditional Chinese medical system that are quite interesting to people in the West.
Well, you know what I'd like, where my curiosity is going two ways at once here. But I'd sort of like to hear, what I'd like to hear is a little bit more of your experience of Qigong, because I understand that your experiencing this over the last couple of years has excited certain kinds of almost scientific curiosities, and I'm very curious about that. And then I would like to hear more from you about your interest in this through the eyes of a cultural critic, how you're putting this together in the sense of making sense of this other kind of esoteric world of art making or of making culture, and how it, because I would assume, knowing what I know about you, that you would be making connections, and I'd be curious to hear about that as well. So I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. And any other questions? Please, if anybody has questions, feel free to engage in the conversation. This is a 60-person conversation, ideally, so don't hold back. But can I?
Well, my first experience with Qigong as an energy system has surprised me a great deal. That a gentleman who came to I was at Tucson at the time, teaching at the University of Arizona. I had a very stable job, a tenured professor, and so pretty young. However, my health went down great deal because I was at Princeton for 5 years, and that 5 years hard work has kind of killed me, and so I was looking for ways to enhance my health and so on. And there is a Qigong seminar that's about this. The gentleman who came to give the seminar arrived at Tucson at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I offered him to stay at my house. I have a big house there. And in the next 3 days, and he stayed with us, he didn't eat a penny, okay? And he drank about 2 or 3 Coke or something because it was so dry in the summer, actually in summer, in August. You can imagine that in Tucson it's not that and I was so interested. So also, I had a lot of questions. So 3 days I almost followed him. And discuss this, ask so many questions.
What kind of questions were you asking?
Oh, all kinds of the questions you are asking. All this about what this Qi is and what is I had this notion of Qigong, of course, in China back in the late, but I didn't know that much. And now suddenly I see that this thing carries so much energy, and you don't need to eat, and you sleep about 2 or 3 hours a day. And how that happen? And what do you feel? And all kind of questions. Of course, my friends all come across town and united we talked to these people over and over again, and we went out to the White Mountain to practice out there, to sit down the trees and for imagination and so on and so forth. So it was so wonderful, interesting. But since really struck me a lot is that where is this energy from? Now the only thing I can think at the time is that maybe he was able to put himself in such a state. This is a biological organ, and this big organ could have millions of different states of different energy. Yes. Oh, the person, when he came, this is my wife.
Lily.
Lily, she testified. The time when he come to my house, he said that he haven't eaten for 9 months. I said, what? 9 months?
And he's saying this to a physicist.
And I'm not.
We invited him to stay with us.
Yeah, I want partially some experiment with him. What is? Yeah, he's Chinese. He's Chinese.
Is it Dr. Yang?
No, not him. Not himself, of course. And then I proposed, and the reason I really tried to I like to set up the laboratory immediately. I tried to see that how exactly happened. I tried to also observe what his emotional changes, so on and so forth. The only thing I noticed is that he has this attitude so constant, he speaks so constantly now, no big fluctuations. And I think maybe he's so quiet, and that's a very low energy spending state. But still, that doesn't explain. And then that's my direct motivation to go. And he learned Qigong from Dr. Yan Xin. Now it's my master too. Then I learned that he had a workshop a week later at Chicago. I see that I have to go and see it. That's all. So I started this process, and I had so many different. I have, I feel good, I feel bad, I feel terrible, I feel sensational, I feel joyful. I have all kind of feelings through my whole practice path. I can tell you, there's so many stories to tell. But one thing I concluded from here is that this is a big energy system. So what a big it means is that my chi field, under the guidance of what Dr. Yanxin called the virtue principle. The virtue is that you try to develop really from the inside of your heart this mercy, this compassion towards everyone. Really try hard, very inside, not to you pretend to be someone very merciful and so, very inside. And you try to implement that heart into everything you do. Everything you do. Now, of course, there's a limit.
What's the limit?
No, I mean, we always have this selfishness, right? Do we? We all have this self-interest, do we? We all want to grow. What to grow mean? Grow self, right? So sooner or later, you always enter this conflicts. And the only thing the practice means is that how do you handle this conflicts? How do you put yourself lower and lower again? And try very hard, really. Sometimes it's terrible. Especially when you think that this is good to do, but you can't quite do it. You feel not good about it. But it doesn't matter. The practitioner point of view is that it's not you have the virtue or you don't have the virtue. It's how much virtue you have. It's a quantitative measure. So that's completely different to other. Now, if you do this, together with the meditation is different form. You do it in the daily life when you deal with every matter, with your colleague, with family member, with students, with teachers, with friends, with boyfriends, girlfriends, with everyone. You deal with them, and this relationship, there are lots of things you have to handle according to the principle of virtue. Everything there's way to apply to see how can you make further progress. To go to better, how much help you get, and what help you do to others is not measured by how much you have done. It's measured by how much that the other has benefited from your action. So this is the direct measure of the virtue. It's not, oh, I have done so much for you, why you don't understand? You have done nothing because the others have not benefited anything from what you do. Now what you do, you lower down, you try to delete a little bit yourself again to see that, are you doing this for the ego of yourself? Or you pretend to be something, a big helper? Or you really do something for the benefit of the other? If you do, you might want to change either the strategy or the technique or whatever, or slow down a little bit. It's whatever you can do to make the other.
But it makes a certain sense to me, because it would seem to me that if if everything is in relationship, I mean, essentially while I'm in conversation or focusing my energy or attention on you, that we are in some kind of a relationship, that if my focus is to affect you in a powerful, positive way, then that is going to help me grow.
Yes. There's the virtue principle say that if you really help others, there's tremendous energy coming back to you. And energy might not be revealed at the time that you do things for others, but will be really revealed there when you really need it. So that's why you don't help some others, you just gain a word that, oh, you are a big helper, oh, this one is very compassionate, oh, these are useless.
Yeah.
But really when you're sick, when you have something you really need the medical help, or something you really need help to run a business, something you really need.
Or even if we talk right now, if we brought it into the present, I mean, if I am trying to understand you, and I'm bringing everything I can to bear to really listen and really hear, and also kind of to make sense and to ask questions that I won't go away and go, so in that sense but then how is that how is that benefiting you? I mean, or you're benefiting us by explaining, I mean, I'm a little lost here, but I'm,
It seems like it's the other way around.
Okay.
By him telling us all of these things, and by him helping us, that the energy is being returned.
turn to him,
And
yeah, that's true.
If you are also, when you describe your state, you are also in the state of practice. That's what the modesty itself is a very good way to get energy. You know, when you really try to, that's one of the change really happened in myself during this years of practice is that the way I talk to my colleagues is now different. The way I act in the seminar room is different.
How so?
Well,
How so?
I used to be, someone want to show that my knowledge in the seminar, you do a seminar, good. And you have a problem here, you have a problem there, could you explain here? That was my attitude. And you want to make a show that you are someone, I look very young, that people don't believe I'm a professor here, and so I want to show myself that I'm very, 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 very good. That was my attitude there. What the end result is, I learned less. I go to the seminar room, I did not learn much. That's the result. That's all. Nothing is wrong, nothing is right. It's not saying that, oh, you are modest, oh yeah, this is the right way to do it. No, it's not that. But it's all, you do this, you get that result. If I entertain a conversation with my colleague, I really feel that, well, explain me this thing. I really want to know. I really want to learn. I feel that you have done this and you have more experience than I have. If I have this attitude in me, this conversation will bring me a lot of knowledge. That's no difference. So the cultivation of the virtue is a technique. The virtue here in the Qigong is a technique. It's a technique or it's the rule that you do things according to the rule, you benefit a lot. If you don't, just like you drive the car at high speed, if you don't control yourself, you go out and you overturn. So that's different.
I mean, what strikes me right away is it's an amazing counteraction in principle, for the most crippling aspect of Western culture, which is the greed. That if I mean, here we have this culture where we have this enormous technology, but sitting on top of it are these I mean, if I can make a cartoon for a minute, are these movie moguls who want $30 million for this, and then $30 million for this, and then $30 million for this, and all of a sudden we have this system with this totally awry system, which is an energy system out of balance in a sense. But I want to know a little bit more about this practice. So when you talk about the practice of virtue, go.
The realization that you just described about you're maybe becoming more humble or something similar to
Humble
that.
From inside.
From inside.
Outside you still act as you used to.
Right.
Yeah.
But you didn't conscientiously decide at some point that you were going to do that through the practice of opening your body and opening your heart physiologically. Things changed over time,
No.
and then
I do consciously do that. I do consciously adjust it. So even, for example, if I enter into a conversation with my colleague, I will, at the beginning, I do tell myself that let me not act in the usual way I used to.
But at the point when there was a point in time that you realized that change, was prior to that, was there a conscientious effort to change, or now because you're aware of it, you practice it?
The meditative practice. I meditated for. I used to meditate for half an hour, now for an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes 3 hours, depending on my mental state are, and sometimes happier I can sit for very, very long. Sometimes things happen, then I can only sit, for an hour. These meditative practice helped me a great deal. Great deal, and almost I will say necessary to maintain myself into a state when I'm aware, also I can do it. A lot of people aware, say that, yes, I know that this is better to do this way, but when the things come, I can't actually do it. And so you need the energy. You need the focus of the energy. Where the focus of energy comes to, this is a management of the internal qi. And meditation is a process to manage that qi. For example, when you have a very heavy breath, can you in 2 seconds lie it down almost like breathless? Now think about it. In fact, all what controls how heavy the breath is, a lot it has to do with what you are thinking is. Now, I can actually go to in more detail because that requires some experience. And if you have some experience of meditation, you can instantly turn yourself from a heavy breath to a very light breath. But that transition involves implicitly a changing of the attitude, of the mental attitude. When you breathe very lightly, you have to be relaxed. You can't have a very strong fear or something and also breathe almost breathless. You can't. So you see there is a physical interaction and a mental interaction, a physical process going on and a mental process going on, and two are interconnected. And meditation is more physically oriented. So you consciously adjust your breath and so on, and let it be very slow, very light, and so on and so forth, and focus energy and so on and so forth. However, I'll get back, just finish this. However, in every day you deal with other people, you have this exchange of ideas. That's what the culture involved, that's what the art involved. Ideas, and there's a great deal of mental adjustment needed. And the later part we call it cultivation. The first part, the meditative part, we call it practice. So it's a combination. Qigong is a combination of the practice and the cultivation. You cultivate the external relationship, external qi. You practice your internal vitality. You put the two things together.
I think it's certainly true from what you're suggesting, that the opportunity to do the meditational practice creates an arena in which your awareness, your micro attention allows you to observe yourself, in a far more fundamental manner, and gradually over time, your powers of self-observation are greatly increased, and you can extend that to all of your interactions with people. Consequently, your awareness of whether or not you're being virtuous, being attentive, being present, etc., is vastly increased because of the practice. But it still requires that you put your attention on it. It's not like, some like groovy thing that, just comes over you because you've, unblocked your heart or, something like that. But that there is certainly a profound relationship between the, the ability to be present.
What I was trying to get at with that question was, it's like when I sit and I gather my qi, when things are happening in my body through time, I've experienced that same process where I've observed with my colleagues and things like that, the change over many years of doing sitting. But at the time that I learned those practices, it was only that it wasn't taught to me that those things would happen. It was basically taught to me that to do those things and to have faith in those things. And what I'm getting at is at what point in the teaching is there a transmittance of actual learning the technique to get these things, or just having the faith to just do it and things will happen automatically?
Well, that's a very good question, because that's the whole thing I have been thinking about. That's why I want to turn this practice into a science. When I speak about the science, the practice has to do with the science, is that there is this actual qi exists, no matter we feel it or not. They are there. They govern the interaction. Now, if we develop some awareness, because we are not aware yet, but let's assume it exists, and let's practice and do things according to the law others told us to do. let's try to experience it first without having a faith. Faith is not a good word. It's not good metaphor. However, we can set up the experiments make the assumption. And then we observe the outcome. And it turns out that if you do things like the practice and the cultivation I lay out, you will receive the benefits in your physiological health, or in your mental strength, and in your also the clarity in thinking ahead, and in your relationship with others, in everything, even in your business you're doing or whatever, everything seems to go much smoother than before. These are the outcome. In other words, in the terminology of the Qigong, that is that you have changed the nature, structure of the Qi around you. Then your life tree is not just your body, but it carries the whole Qi along. Since the Qi are changed, your body also changes, because for example, I look younger than I used to look, and the physiological, everything is changing. And then you conclude that, oh yeah, I don't have to have the faith at first place, but I just have to assume it. But I do have to, if I set up the model, I do have to perform the experience rigorously. What does rigorously? You want to say that if I do so, people is going to observe that. But if you don't exactly do what you're supposed to do, then the outcome will not be correct. So the other people asking you to have a faith, essentially is a different way to say that you better to practice seriously. But I will not use that metaphor, because that could, imply other things. But rather to say that, have a serious attitude to assume this is the case, and let's replace it by the open-mindedness. If we had open-mindedness, think this could be possible, it costs nothing to assume that, and let's move on from that on to see if need to change it, we change that. Yeah.
But that's a very powerful, shift too. I mean, you talk about replacing faith with a very positively held model, that you say that your imagination is such that you really permit the possibility that that is really a true outcome. Not even is it a possible outcome, it might even be a likely outcome. And that then readdresses the question about intentionality in terms of quantum mechanics, which, whether popularized or not, whether done in a mushy, popular way or a rigorous, truthful, accurate way, we know that the way in which we imagine events might outcome has a very positive, measurable result in many instances in terms of the actual outcome. And so whether or not you want to term that faith, or whether you want to term that a very clearly defined model, starts to have some, those two things start to have a relationship which normally are not suggested.
There was
a question over here. I wanted to get to this.
How are these ideas being received in China today, and is there a political dimension or coefficient to this?
Good question.
Well, Qigong, just like everything else, whenever involve a lot of people in it, there are lots of energies, and the social system does not like the high, big energy waves. It's just like everything else in the social system, that things are oscillatory. In the mid-80s, that the Qigong has played a very, very important role in the healthcare system. Basically, there are a lot of people was under very economically very poor people, and they don't get a good health care. But through the Qigong practice, which costs nothing, is go to the park and practice, and or in group or in meetings, and they miraculously get cured, and the energy seems to flow, and people get more energetic and get more calm and so on. There are a lot of changes, and people really can testify this. And there are also scientists has done experiments to test whether outside of our this body, this physical thing, is there anything else around the body? And they test that in the medium place while the Qigong lecture is going on, or in some specially sealed room with particular sample, and have certain particular gifted individual like Qigong masters to treat the sample to see using the spectroscopy, using the Raman, using the also the alpha particle detector, gamma ray particle detector, and all this modern instrument.
And what do they see when they start looking at it?
They see remarkable differences. With very one of the experiments was especially the reason I was interested in Dr. Zhensu is precisely because he is the one who collaborated with the top scientists, the scientists in the top institution in China, including Tsinghua University, and also the laboratory of high energy physics of Academia Sinica. Okay, all these are very traditionally very strong institution, and people there are serious people. And I read a book about how they set up the experiment, how they did it, and one of the papers they published, one of the papers has involved 8 senior scientists in the group. And has a referee team. It's got to referee, which a referee team, because the paper got published after referee by the also senior science, referee team of 28 senior scientists. So they are really, really serious about it, and half of those 28 scientists are the member of National Academy there. And so they were very serious about how really a human being, have an existence outside the body. Okay, and even in long distance so on. And Dr. Zhensu was successful in changing the radioactive rate, the half-life time at distance. They set up the samples at the lab and measure the radioactive rate before, and then put it aside in a special room, and Dr. Zhensu was treated from distance far away, very far away, and
he was treated with Qigong.
He emitted Qi out of his own Qi.
Okay.
I still can't figure out how to describe his Qi in what geometrical form or whatever.
What would you try? Have you tried? What would
I
it
was going
sound
to
like?
ask you, what do you think this is? What is the nature of this Qi?
Okay, one of my guess, this is only guess, it's very speculative, is that, as I said earlier, that everyone has a wave function, have a quantum mechanical nature. If you talk about quantum mechanical nature, you don't have to emit anything. It's there. Just only the connection, your spatial field can have a very non-isotropic structure. You can have, for example, if your sun is over there, you think about him, maybe this direction the field is much stronger than in the other direction. That's I just give an example. So the field around us, especially what's created by the brain, could be so isotropic.
What does it mean, isotropic?
Isotropic, I'm sorry. I use this word so often I forgot. Isotropic, that it emits same thing in the same direction,
Okay.
Identically. So
Okay.
isotropic.
Okay.
And people say that one of the objections that people against his experiment that he affecting distance. Do you know how long the distance is? 2,000 kilometers.
Oh my
Is
gosh.
he in a different room?
2,000 kilometers.
Different continent.
Very much so.
So therefore that people say impossible because the intensity of the Qi will get inversely proportional to the 1/distance squared and so on and so forth. But they forgot they have this assumption of the isotropy in mind. If it's not isotropic, if it's just one direction, why do you have to decrease anything at all? No, so this is an idea, just to give an idea of how anisotropy could actually set up some powerful field in some particular direction which do not decay in distance, for example. However, what I really want to come to is that if you imagine the field this way, but if you want to keep this anisotropic, what is needed is a focus, right? It's a focus, and that's needed practice. Without good practice, you might be able to maintain a little this array for hundreds of seconds, but then it's gone. But a good practitioner, a gifted person, what I believe is that he was able to maintain his focus constantly in time, in distance, so that things do not that decay and can have persistent action, together with its density and so on and so forth.
Together with his what?
The density of energy. The density is high.
Through the focus. No.
Well, you still have to have the whole volume to be high before you focus and then create high density. If the whole volume for me that, for example, the way I estimate my energy is not set so high. Even I focus in a very small distance, the density is not so tremendous.
So what happened in the experiment is that he focused his energy over 2,000 kilometers, and what happened to the radioactive?
Okay, what scientists detect is this: they put here, and he announced it on the phone that now I treat it. Okay, so you measured it some time ago, and then you took it, you mount it to the instrument, you measured it again. Okay, measured again, and you see the people remove about the error of the experiment is 0.4%, but the change is 8%. So it's much beyond any experimental uncertainty. And people say, well, did the second time you put your samples on this right way? Okay, that is easy to answer. You let it there. After little time, after about 10 hours to 15 hours, come back. So therefore,
what do you mean come back?
Come back to this original value. Reverse the original value.
Okay.
It's been changed after that time of treatment, but after 15 hours, it comes back. So nothing changed. This room is sealed because every detector, everything works automatically. Don't have to have anyone to watch it. Okay. So these are
I wanted to ask, did that answer, did you feel like your question was answered?
No, but I want to know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm interested in how this is going to affect the whole nature of how we consider social, political relationships. The world now considers money and power and energy to be the basis of social organization and power. I believe that the whole nature of quote reality as we know it, based on the geopolitical, chemical things, is going to be undercut by some sort of great moral or political unifying force that this could be part of. But of course, nobody knows the shape that will be. But I have a feeling that something like this will come from a place like China or India or Greece or some ancient centers of quote culture or civilization as we know it. Time for some sort of like this.
I'm kind of curious.
Well, I want to know how the Chinese Communist Party reacts to all of this. Do they see it as a threat? Do they see it as something that can be manipulated, or how does it fit in with just the social order as the Chinese people, especially as the Chinese Communist Party, enforces it?
Well, this is not my expertise. I particularly do not want to get to the political side of this, and so I don't have enough information really to answer that question. But the only thing I know is that from the natural law I observe, everything will go up and down. Okay, and in mid-80s it's up, and in late 90s actually a couple of the Tiananmen Square event it come down. And then people start to criticize, even people initially say that this is a wonderful experiment, then they end up saying that no, this experiment is still not rigorous, and so on and so forth. So all this are coupled to the big atmosphere of the social, political, whatever. But one thing I'm sure is that if the society discover at least the health benefit of this thing, they will never abandon. And in the history of China, and there has been many, many times that this has come up and down, up and down. And so, in other words, that at this particular point, that Qigong is still practiced by millions and millions of people in China. The government issued a regulation guideline last year to say that we need to regulate a little bit to get the health benefit to be revealed, but we don't want to go any further. So obviously they have some fear about the power of this, but partially because there are people who use that energy for their own purpose. They are. I mean, this is the world. We are living this world. Everyone's human beings.
So when you started practicing, is it simply a meditational practice, or is it a physical practice as well?
Well, I said already that there are two parts. One is cultivation, one is practice. So there are practice part is meditative part, which you have to. I listen to a tape and I try to do things, imagine, visualize things according to the instruction Dr. Yanshin recorded in the tape, and not only actually record the actual instruction in the meditation, but also he recorded a lot of things about why you have to, what is virtue is about, and how to cultivate virtue and all these things, which gives me a great deal of help in just my cultivation aspect. And I think my biggest progress takes place when I really take the cultivation aspect seriously, and also try to couple it with practice.
I have a question. It's occurred to me over time that I'm not making any comparisons between Qigong and, say, for example, mystical Christianity or Kabbalah or Sufi mysticism, but and yet I do see some similarity between all practices that are designed to increase the good in the world, one could say, and decrease bad.
Interesting.
Let's put it that way.
I don't think you should shy away from making a comparison.
Okay, fine, okay.
It's valid.
Well, I guess I am. But the question that I have, because this is something that you've thought about, and not that many people think about these things, why should any such discipline be so difficult? Why should any such knowledge, any esoteric knowledge, any practice of increasing the good, or any practice of doing the right, doing the good thing, be inaccessible natively to any human being? Why should it be so difficult?
This is part of there are politics here involved too, and maybe let's hear a few questions.
I have a question from a while back. As in every spiritual philosophy, there's an explanation for the fall from universal love, or the godliness, or the dharma, and there's a fall. I was wondering, in the Qigong philosophy and the training to attain virtue, how do you explain why we have to do this? Why are we right? I mean, I know the Indian belief of the ego and attachment, and the Judeo-Christian. I don't know Eastern philosophy.
Yeah. Why have to do this? That's a good question. Now, as far as I understand, in the Qigong, we're not saying that you have to do this. But if you do this, you will get a certain result. So this is the difference between the science and the religion. So, let me here try to make my version of the distinction. In religion, that we tell people that this is a right, that this you have to do this. In science, that there are some law we discover. If you do things according to the law, you get this output. If you do this if you initially do this, you get this output. If you do that, you get the other output. But they only describe the process. Okay. But the law described is approximate. It's never ultimate. Okay. And it's subject to changes when we get a bigger picture and deeper understanding and so on and so forth. So the science doesn't bother to tell something wrong because it's going to modify anyway. And now, what Qigong is, for me, that it has similar status. It seems to state, for example, the principle of virtue is to be regarded as a theorem that if you do this, you will get that. Now, whether this is correct or not, you test out yourself. So it's not to say that if you do this, you're a good person. If you don't do it, you're a bad person. No. I'm not contradicting anything.
Right.
I'm just trying to explain what Qigong is.
Right.
Okay. But now everyone has learned. For example, religion I learned is a version maybe different from anyone else learned. But the one I have learned, I go to the church and people tell me that you have to accept that without question. Some of them, at least some of them, you have to accept it without question. The science is that you can question anything. Why? Because science is talk about process. It's neutral. It's that a process is go this way. You set up different initial conditions. It give a different output. That's what law is about. And this equation you write down. At the very beginning, he's telling you that this is approximate. It's not accurate equation. You can replace the Newton's equation by Einstein's equation. You get better. You can replace the Maxwell equation by quantum mechanical equation. That's going to work better. Okay. However, sometimes to the macroscopic world, you can't solve the quantum mechanical equation at all because it involves too many particles. You better to solve approximate one with Maxwell equation. You still get some output. You see, even the better one even has better use in some cases than the others. So that is exactly Qigong is talking about. For example, if you see that you were earlier see that being humble. Is humble a good thing? Of course, it could be good. But sometimes, if you are a chairman of the board, if you are too humble, you probably can't function anything at all.
Yes.
What is good about it? So, Qigong is not saying that being humble is good, or not being humble is bad. He never say that. But he said that if your appearance is humble, you will get some output. One of the output is that you probably can learn more from the other people, but the other output is that probably you can't get the respect from others either. Either way, you deal with it. You try to balance yourself. So this is what we were talking about when we talk about Qi. With the title, today's title, we talk about the universal interaction. We're only interested here in the interaction law, and we try to discover that whether wrong or right actually subject to discussion, and everyone is welcome, to join their own view and to complement the whole picture to get the better picture. And this is a Qigong.
What's your question? There's another question behind that.
Go ahead.
Oh, excuse me. I've done a little bit of Qigong a couple of times to the teachers, and they there was a lot of exercises of using your, I can hardly remember, but and walking in certain ways and analogies to animals. Did you hear this?
Well, there are very, very many different forms of Qigong practice, but the practice I have seen, well, I've seeking for the true practice.
Yes.
The most of the Qigong practice I have seen only emphasize the outside form and management of Qi, ignored actually the cultivation aspect, and that's a bit unfortunate. But it takes time for people to really understand the truth of what we call traditional Qigong, which back to 3,000, 5,000 years ago. What people at that time, they also do the movement, but they not do the movement for movement. They are really cultivated inside, but outside there's certain manifestation and take place in a natural way, and so they are a form of Qigong, but miss the cultivation aspect is sometimes is the most central part of it. That's right.
Good question here.
When you talk about the system itself, though, is the system to open the body so that the chi flows freely, so that internally there's a harmony and balance of the organs, so that your emotions will be in balance, so that you don't have those experiences of going beyond those emotions and robbing your body of its vitality because your emotions take over. Is that what you mean by when you're saying cultivation?
It's not very easy to answer this question because it really requires a whole lecture to describe what this is really about. But in brief, briefly, the purpose of practice is not just to achieve the perfect harmony. Perfect harmony is there, no activity. But it's a very subtle balance with the activity and the motion towards the harmony. That's the way I feel. Now, this is the way I feel today. I may feel differently tomorrow. You see, so keep in mind that really I'm not telling you what it's really about. Maybe I have been thinking so much that so I can still tell something, but all I say is very relative, very relative. So the vitality is important. You should not kill the vitality. It's not just sitting there dead, not thinking about anything. As far as the one I learned is it's not that. It's not that. But it's a combination of it that once the energy comes in, you have to have the attitude to deal with it. For example, once you get deep meditation, you might feel a tremendous energy come in. Do you feel excited? Do you feel overwhelmingly joyful? If you do, then you are leaving the optimal state.
Leaving?
Leaving. Yeah, you're getting away from the optimal state because your emotion will not allow you to maintain that energy. That's all. It's not saying that having emotion is bad. Again, back to this. It's not saying that having emotion is good or bad. You have emotion, the energy wash away, go back. If you don't, if you manage to keep it, there are, in our technique of meditation, there are instructions, clear instructions tell you what to do. And if you follow that, you can better keep it for later use, for tomorrow use and day after tomorrow use, not just watch it. That's all the difference.
Okay, we got two different questions going, maybe here and then here. No, did you answer your question?
I have more of a general question. Earlier, before you talked about traditional physics and you talked about the new world and how the new world is now more complex. The complexity that you're talking about, is that an evolution to the complexity that exists now, or has it always been that way? I asked that question because you talk about certain models that you can use today that you couldn't use yesterday, that somewhat become outdated, and I wonder if you went back in time and you took a model that you have now and you tried to apply it, say 1,000 years ago, would it work?
Well, my feeling is that we are create a great deal of complexity today with the evolution of the civilization. In other words, the social complexity is obviously rising compared to we had, as human society had 5,000 years ago. But it's kind of interesting that I myself do not have a final answer. This is one of the questions. If we one day, if out of this discussion we can form a forum and continue that discussion, I'll be glad to
I think it's a really interesting question.
That there seems to have some degree of complexity or the ordering, move from the inside towards the outside.
What do you mean by that? Can you explain that a little bit?
My feeling is this. Well, I may be wrong here. I'm being a scientist. I'm very cautious. When I clearly say that this is speculation. I think that our ancestors have more order inside the body than we have now. One of the reasons is that the complexity of the thinking is much diversified now, and much more selfishness going on in here. And now, there's globally, socially, there's more harmony at that time than harmony now. And so the ordering is, however, we experience much stronger energy information flow, especially information with the creation of the Ethernet. You see how now the distance is completely washed away. It just is all the density of flow that the Netscape and so on and so forth. That this information usually help to exchange. So with a complex structure, it needs a very big information flow to maintain it. Now we are creating this information flow to maintain it. And when you take the evolution point of view, do we have this energy information flow back to 5,000 years ago? I think we do. But they are more sort of inside the mind. So that's the reason I'm saying that we take things inside to now.
So you're saying that you think that there was more harmony inside and more information inside. Is that what you're saying?
No. The body, a couple thousand years ago, has the good information flow inside, which maintain the good structure inside. Now some of this mechanism is now kind of through our intelligence, through our development of what science, technology, or see. It's kind of revealed outside, popped up to the surrounding things. So in that regard, I do not consider an accident to have the Renaissance 300-400 years ago. It's a the result of natural evolution. When something inside is revealed outside, you got to have a freedom to express. Otherwise, the pressure is going to arise. When the pressure rises to a certain point that the old social structure will not be able to maintain its rigid framework and individualism and expression and what the strong driven of science here is the curiosity and the freedom for the exploration. Without that, there's no modern science. And these two things are, I think, also certain revelation, or not revelation, but emergence of our inside ability, inside mechanism to be outside.
Well, there's also, twice as many people now on the planet as there were 15 years ago? I mean, there's so much more physical information as well. There's so many physical bodies as well.
But I think there's some room for some discussion there too, because I think the kind of information is very different that we're dealing with now than, say, for instance, 3,000 years ago. I mean, if you look at older cultures or cultures that are more tied to the landscape, or even like the ancient Greek culture, so like in the case of a landscape where people know every crevice in the land, its seasonal changes, the plants that are there, the stories that go with the plants, the changes of the constellations, all of the things that go on in the changing of the physical, natural environment, the subtlety of which is, absolutely beyond us at this juncture. People go back and try to study the complexity of different kinds of natural relationships, and it's very, very challenging for them. Our minds are not currently modeled to accept that quantity of that kind of information because of the way that we're being raised. I mean, on the other hand, generations of people today, do marvelously well with the sophisticated mechanisms of advertising or the Disneyfication of culture, or all of those kinds of things. But those are external pressures. Those are different kinds of stories, but I think it's questionable whether or not the quantity of information that people are dealing with today in our modern culture is really that much larger than the quantity of information that was present before. It's just extremely different. Or, as a different example, maybe not grounded in the natural landscape, but like the ancient Greeks had a system of memory techniques, mnemonics, that Frances Yates writes about so beautifully in this book, The Art of Memory, in which she describes, and it's well documented, that Simonides of Chios was in about 5th century BC, had developed a technique of memorizing things so that it would be possible for rhetoricians and orators of ancient Greece could give these incredible speeches. They had huge things that were memorized. I mean, not to forget that Homer's poem was originally spoken and memorized by bards. So this whole possibility of storytelling or remembering and memorizing huge volumes of information that, again, today a person simply couldn't memorize that. And how did they do that? They did that with this artificial palace or a system of architecture in their mind in which they would place, it was like traveling through the speech was the metaphor, and it was like traveling through a palace in which, say, for instance, different objects were placed that would stimulate the speaker to remember not an approximation of the couplets, say, for instance, for that particular verse, but exactly that thing. I mean, even by the time of Plato, the system was already significantly lost. So it was a very ancient art that had, even by this time and by Cicero's time, people reference it, people talk about it, even in the Middle Ages. But with the burning of the libraries in Alexandria, with the loss of so many manuscripts during the Dark Ages, and even within the context of ancient, Greece and Rome themselves, these techniques were already, vastly lost. But the possibility existed. People knew that, and it's very interesting in terms of Qigong, because for instance, there was in Middle Ages or early Proto-Renaissance, Giordano Bruno had invented in England a theater of memory, and he played with a lot of these similar kinds of ideas about memorizing things. And interestingly, René Descartes was a student of these same kinds of techniques and an admirer of Bruno's. But he said, what the problem with that memorization technique is? Everything's so qualitative, It's all of these images of poetry or statues or gardens or all of these very subjective kinds of things. We really need to change that memory system to be a quantitative system instead. If only they would substitute all of those images for numbers, then you would have something. And this is, of course, the origin of the computer. I mean, that you can really literally trace the development of the computer to this moment in time, which in many ways dates all the way back, really and truly, to, say, many centuries BC in ancient Greece. And there's a connection to the Qigong visualization. The Qigong technique of Dr. Yanshin in the meditational practice incorporates the very specific visualization of certain types of images. There's a large pink flower, a lotus flower, for instance, and that carries with it some very, very specific information. So I think that we've been working on this idea of quantum information. We haven't really talked about the content yet of what type of information might be present in these fields, but this is also a very important part of the picture, because it's not only that there is a system that allows for different models or analogies that we can think of that allow for information exchange, but also terribly important is what kind of information is being exchanged, and does it in and of itself inherently have something highly specific to its characteristics, like the plants in the landscape, right? If you cut yourself, you want to use an aloe, or you might want to use a lichen, but you're not going to use, a sweet potato vine, right? Because there's some very specific information in those plants and in everything. I mean, I'm just using that as an example, but everything, its specific content, its specific information is absolutely critical. And I don't think it's, accidental that at the edge of the so-called information age, we are starting to look at these issues as are physicists, as are a lot of people, starting to be able to put together some broad thought systems that incorporate interaction through fields of specific information, in essence, meaning. What is the function of, where's meaningfulness available to us?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're talking about combining a qualitative system of memory with a quantitative system of memory to be able to ideally access
everything.
everything as it moves and the dynamism of everything, which is a non-static everything. Is that what, in a sense, what you're talking about?
I'm not sure, yes, but yes, in essence, yes, but I'm not sure that I would focus on non-static or whether or not it needs to be dynamic or not. Although we're talking about the universal interaction of things, does,
But I mean, if
of
it's
course,
alive, it's
apply.
dynamic. I mean, it's just that's.
Yes, but I think that things carry information that's available, like when you tap into it or not. I think that's how art works a lot of the time.
What do you mean by that? So what do you mean?
Well, let's use an example of, any kind of an abstract sculpture that we've all seen a million times. Let's take just we'll say a tube of polished chrome steel, a tubular kind of a structure. And what is that? Is that a Platonic ideal form and that represents truth of some sort? Is that just pure geometry, unattached to any type of emotional content whatsoever? Is it supposed to represent a piece of superstring from the superstring theory, that everything is connected by these giant pieces of, superstring, and is that what that sculptor is, representing there? Is it actually like a piece of pasta and represents the heroism of everyday life of putting macaroni and cheese on the table for your kids day in, day out? You really need to, or is it all of those things? I mean, it possibly all of those things. The information that is available in the object needs to be decoded by the viewer. So what I mean to say is that, the information is there, it's a question of whether or not you can access it, and also maybe if the information is too weakly placed there. I mean, if it is the pasta, there might be a lot of other better ways to communicate pasta-ness and the transcendence of everyday life than using an abstracted metallic form. And that might be the fault of the artist, but it also might be the fault of the viewer or the critic or the interpretive agency that's there. But the information is there to be tapped, and it's an interactive function. That information is carried in the field of the art object as well as, or any other number of objects, as well as personal interactions with people. I mean, if it's true that the universe is comprised of an essential field that is that oneness, maybe it's in duality, but if its inherent character is ultimately like the undercurrent in the ocean, if that undercurrent in the ocean is ultimately unified and of a whole of some sort, then the information that's carried there, it doesn't really matter whether it's static or dynamic in a living or non-living system. And Qi does not come only from living things. The table also has Qi. Everything has Qi to it, and that Qi is its essential information that is available in a fundamental way, or what interests us then is this idea that that is quantum information.
Now, how is that quantum information?
Would you like to say how it's quantum information, or shall I?
You can say your version.